I found these two rings, they're metal rings, while I was busy with my trainees digging up an area of ground to make a new wildflower bed. And I thought to myself, well, these are really interesting, and I actually could immediately see them as being made into a necklace of some sort. They're just obviously washers from some piece of agricultural equipment. So the first thing that I'm going to need to do is just to remove some of this little bit of rust that's here. And to do that, I am just going to take a bowl and put some water in there with some vinegar and just leave it for a little while just to soak. So I've got in my little dish a couple of tablespoons of water and probably about 2 tablespoons of red wine vinegar. And I'm just going to take these two little discs and I'm going to pop them in there and just leave them for an hour or two. I'll monitor it and just see. But what happens is that the acidity from the vinegar does tend to lift the rust, and it actually will show when it's ready, because you'll start seeing little bits and pieces floating around in the water. So I'm just going to leave this to do its magic, and I'll be back. So it's been a couple of hours that I have left this in the container, simply because I was just busy doing other things. And you will definitely be able to see here all the sediment and the sort of scum that's picked up on it. So I'm going to go and wash this under some warm water with some dishwashing liquid and give it a good dry, and then we'll have a look back at it. This little bit here that you can see that looked very dirty, that just had bubbles on the area. So you can actually see that this is cleaned up really nicely. Both of them. How cool is that? Okay, see you in a bit. So I've given these little washers a really good rinsing off with some fairy liquid or sunlight liquid, dishwashing liquid, whatever you call it. And yeah, 2 reasons. One, I wanted to remove the smell of fish and chip shop from it, because I thought if I made a necklace I didn't really want that to be with me forever, or certainly for a while. And the second is just to remove any acidity from the vinegar away from the paper, because we know that acid eats paper. So my next choice is to either cover these little discs with fabric or with paper. You could choose either, but for today I'm actually going to work with some papers. I did have this pad of watercolor papers, which are sort of scrapbook thickness, that I'd got just from Poundland, I think. So they weren't very expensive. But when you look at the designs, I've either got one flat color that's going to look pretty like ugh, or I've got something with a bigger design that's not going to fit onto my little discs that size, because I'd only get part of these designs. That would just be color, which is fine if that's what you want. That's just not me. Yeah, I'm not keen on that. That would just be color by the time I put it down. So you could use these little discs just as a window to see what you would get. So I'm going to put this one aside, even though, oh, where's that one? I did quite like this, but then I just thought, oh, it's just going to be stripes. So I have 2 other alternatives that I've found. One lot is this paper that comes in Daphne's diary. You get scrapbooking papers. This is a paperweight paper, and it's quite thin. This is cardboard. Now the reverse side of this has these 2 sort of pop-outs with chickens. So if I'm going to use this design, I need to be aware that this is going to be where the images are popping out, so I'd have to cut on the opposite side. So my one design is, although I really do like this one, it is quite big and I wouldn't get much color on there. I'm going to go with a slightly smaller one where I could pick up a bit of the gold and a little bit of the blue together, and one's going to have to just wiggle around and try and find a suitable spot where you feel that you would like to place your design. I do have mirror images here, so I could actually put those on either side, but it wouldn't really matter. I'm kind of leaning a little bit more towards these designs in the middle, where perhaps if I got a heart, let's just see what this is like. I can draw a circle around it, and that will give me an indication of where the design is. So alright, immediately you can see you would lose the heart here, and that would be the outline, which is quite pleasing with the colors. So I'm going to fiddle around with that design until I've come up with a section that I'd like to actually use. The second one, I thought I'd like to have something a little bit more neutral, and I've got this book of printed tracing paper or vellum, that has a whole lot of designs. So I'm just going to flip through this until something catches my eye. What I do like about them is that the designs are fairly small by and large, and that they would actually give quite nice even coverage. So this would be a very sort of subdued necklace if I was making it with this. It's quite nice because it has an almost circular pattern to it, but then the other side would be pretty lost. So maybe an all-over pattern for this one would be a better option. This leafy one is quite nice. If I position that so I didn't lose all the leaves. So that's an option. This one's even better because it's smaller and it's an all-over design. What else have we got here? The little daisies and the leaves. I actually think I'm going to go with this one, simply because this is an all-over small pattern, and because it's not going to have a lot of color. If I was to actually use this, you could see that it's going to cover that rather nicely. So for now I'm going to trace these and cut them out, and then I'll show you how we're going to attach them to the little washers. My washers are nice and clean, and I have cut out 2 of my vellum circles, if I can catch one. And when I place it over the washer, you can see that that is slightly dull in color, as opposed to having it on a piece of white paper. Let me just grab this. So if I put white down and that underneath, you can see that the color is much more vibrant. So I've opted here just to take my washer and paint it. I've given it one coat, and the paint doesn't have to be particularly fancy. This is just an attester paint in chalk white, and I'm just going to give it a second coat quickly. This is lovely because this paint dries really quickly, so I'm not looking for 100% perfect paint finish, but I do want to have a thin layer, and I do want to have it quite smooth. So even though it's not looking perfect, it's going to do just fine. I'm going to just do the edges here as my fingers allow me. I'm going to just quickly flip this over to do this side. Having done one coat, it will cover up fairly nicely. And this little paint really doesn't take very long to dry at all, probably about 10 minutes. So I'm just going to then set this aside before I stick this down. So just remember, painting is always an option as a base if you feel that the colors warrant it. Right, so let me just leave that to dry, just resting on the edge of my double-sided tape. I'm going to wash my brush, and then I'll be back. I've painted the one washer, and I've cut out my circles. I had originally decided that I would use this paper to cover the one circle, but I went back to my original choice because I just think that I will use these colors a little bit more than something that is quite as blue as that. The washer that I painted white, the moisture from the paint has started to activate a little bit of the rust on that, so you've got 2 alternatives. You could either put sand it down and just put a rust primer on if you've got one, but having decided I was going to actually use this vellum or tracing paper with the printed design on, I put it over it, and I actually quite like that little bit of a brown tinge showing through. I don't know if you can see it with the light. So I think I'm going to go with that and just let the rust do its thing. It's not going to get too bad. I have taken a bit of varnish, deco varnish, and put that over the top. So let's start gluing it now. I'm going to start off. I've just got a little bit of the Elmer's school glue. I like this because it's got a nice smooth even consistency, and I'm going to be gluing down one side at a time. Now the paper, when you cut them out, will be slightly bigger than your design, and rather have it a little bit big than have it too small because you can run into a lot of trouble with that. I'm putting a little bit of glue on the inside of the ring, but not on the outside, because I'm not going to carry my design over to the edges because it's just too difficult to fold it in. So I'm going to try and center this as best as I can, and if I turn this over and I have a look in the middle, I'll be able to see whether the little bit of paper that I have there is more or less even or not, using my fingers just to spread that evenly on. I'm going to curve the paper down slightly as it rounds on the actual ring itself, just using my finger. There's no glue there, so ultimately I will cut that off, but it just helps to secure the edge of the paper that's closest to the end of the circle so that it doesn't want to lift up. Alright, so now I'm going to just quickly do the other side, and as you can see, this is a fairly quick process. I'm just putting some glue on here, and once my papers have dried completely, then I will actually just take a pair of sharp scissors and just trim that off, and that's really easy to do. Right, so I'm just going to smooth that off, make sure that the whole area is covered. Then I want to make sure that that side up is that side up here, because if I'm going to put a thread on this so that I can actually hang it, I don't want to find that if I turn it over that it's the wrong way around. So that stem goes that way and that stem goes that side, so that's fine. I'm going to turn this over and just see how my edges are lining up, and just press this firmly to the edge and flatten down the sides ever so slightly. As I say, it's just really to make sure that these edge pieces are well and truly glued down. I'm going to do the same with this, and a little bit more difficult to see the glue once you've actually painted it white, but as long as you can see that it's shiny, if you tilt it to the light you'll know that it's wet. Stay. Right, this is quite a nice vellum, it's nice and thick, so I'm happy with the thickness of that. This won't be so easy to bend down to the edges because it is a slightly firmer piece of paper, so just going to press this really well down to the edges, put glue on the other side. I'll leave this to dry and then we'll come and have a look at it once it's all dried. So not too difficult at this stage, and I'm actually in a way quite pleased with this little bit of brown that's popping through from behind this washer, because I think it's just going to break up the design. So let's just see how it all pans out once everything's dried. Alright, so you can see that little bit of brown popping through. I don't think it's going to get much more than that. So we've got a slight overhang on all sides. Right, make sure that you've squeezed it down at the edges because this one's going to stay flat, and leave it to dry. Right, see you shortly. Okay, so my glue is now bone dry, and on this one that had the paper I've just used a pair of scissors just to trim around on both sides. The one with the vellum, I'm just going to show you that if you have a small pair of pointed scissors and you just put your point in there, just using small little snips almost at an angle, you're going to get quite a nice even finish. And what you do is that you work from one side to get that opening done nicely, and then you come through from the other side just to make sure that you've got all the little bits cleaned out there. The next thing that you're going to do is just to take something either like an emery board or a piece of water glass sandpaper, and you're just lightly going to sand any edges that might be rough. So if you just go around this, I'm just using one of these nail files just to quietly and gently just smooth off the edges. It just gives it a nice finish, gets rid of any little fluffy little bits, any little overhangs that there might be. And then the last thing that I'm going to do, which I will do off camera because it just takes ages to dry, is I'm going to put a coat of varnish on both sides. So very cleverly, I've just shaken this one up because I haven't used it for a while. Read the label and it says don't shake, it causes bubbles, but this is a royal coat and that's a dimensional glue, so I think that that's probably the one that I'd like to use. Otherwise you do get other glues like a hard varnish, which will be a very, very strong furniture finish, but you can use it for something like that as well. Or you could actually use just a high gloss varnish, or you get varnishes in matte. But I do think I'm going to use the dimensional one on this. So I'm going to just continue sanding and buffing these edges down, and then I'll apply the coat of varnish, and then we'll put the final assembly together. My necklaces are now finished. What I did do was to put 2 coats of varnish on either side of my paper once I had finished, and then I had a couple of these rings left over and some of these odd shaped sort of beady things, and I've just strung this together on some brown cord with some gold
beads, and I'm really happy with that. I think that's going to go beautifully with quite a lot of clothes I wear. And then I had another black ring with a few smaller ones and this slightly sort of marbled disc as well. So I'm very happy. I could either wear that just plain on the one side, or I could flip it over, which gives it a bit more detail and a bit more of an accent. So although the designs themselves are very simple, I'm quite happy with that, and considering they were just things that I found at work lying around in the ground, whether they last or not, I don't really care. I'm going to enjoy them for the time that they will be part of my life. Anyway, I hope this has inspired you to make something out of something that you found. And if you have liked the video, please give me a thumbs up, consider subscribing to my channel, and yeah, tell me about some of the things that you've made or you would like to learn. Bye for now.